Welcome to another episode of Mission Compliance, Unleashing Growth Potential for Defense Contractors. In today's episode, we continue down the road of understanding CMMC, its regulations, and controls. Up next is AC L2-3.1.14, Route Remote Access via Managed Access Control Points. We'll break down what this control means, why it matters, and how it impacts your organization's cybersecurity posture. We'll also provide practical insights and strategies for achieving compliance and securing your systems effectively. So whether you're a defense contractor aiming to win more contracts or simply someone interested in bolstering your cybersecurity knowledge, you're in the right place. Let's go. We're joined once again today by Mike Frieder, President of On-Call Compliance Solutions and a CMMC Professional Assessor. Thanks for joining us, Mike.
Hey, always a pleasure, Roman.
So, Mike, we are more than halfway through this first control family, so yay.
I know, it's amazing, right? Halfway through the first family.
Halfway through the first family. Don't worry, guys. We're not going anywhere for a long time. We got, what, 97 more controls
That's it, man.
after this? So,
it's funny. We try so hard to go out there and, give out so much information for free, but the reality is it's time versus money, right? I mean, that's kind of one of the biggest challenges with this is it's such a daunting compliance standard to really, approach. It's doable. It's just a matter of time. And boy, if you've got to be compliant with this stuff now, you just, that's I think where the expert help that we provide really comes in. But yeah, hey, 97 controls to go, and we're on like what, episode 40, something like that.
Episode 42. This is 42.
Wow.
We're actually a little bit more than halfway. There's 22 controls in this first family. It's actually, I think, the longest of the control families. So they're not going to get longer than control family 1. I think control family 13 is pretty long. I think it's like 16, but I think that's the closest we get. But this week we're talking about routing access through control points. Control points can include routing traffic through a firewall, a VPN, or logging activities through a SIEM system. So why is it important to route traffic through control points like these?
So, what this control is all about is well, it's about control, right? So it's about controlling how remote access goes into your system. And, on the surface, you think to yourself, this seems kind of silly, right? The only way people can remote in is maybe a VPN or something like that. But actually, that's not really true. And I think that's really where the crux of this gets to is, somebody could install remote access software into their computer quite easily. And when they do that, you basically sort of break security because you're sort of rolling and bulldozing down those walls, right? That perimeter that you created with the firewall. If those firewall ports are open, for instance, and they're going to allow something like TeamViewer or VNC or something like that, IT needs to be made aware of that, and you've got to control how people can get into the system. Otherwise, you wind up in a situation, and we see this all the time with small to mid-sized businesses, where people can just remote in and use all kinds of different solutions, and all of a sudden, there's like 1,000 doors you have to protect. And that's really bad. And so I think that's one of the reasons why this control exists is because you want to make sure that you don't have random screen doors opening on you when you're trying to secure a system. It's much easier to control and secure one way in and block everything else than it is to be in a situation where you are, just allowing anything through the front gates. So yeah, that's kind of really, that's what this is all about. And then, I guess the secondary part, of course, is, are you watching those connections, right? Like, do you have some kind of monitoring going on to make sure that there aren't rogue remote access connections that are popping up? And if that were to happen, do you have a mechanism that will monitor that? All of those things, in my opinion, are very important.
Absolutely. These control points are put in place to manage external traffic and verify user identities, all in the name of safety, so that you can't have somebody, as you said, coming in through a screen door when you're trying to secure everything. So what are the key assessment points that an assessor would be looking for on this one?
Yeah, it's interesting. There's only 2 of them on this one, but they're important, right? So first is determining if managed access control points are identified and implemented. And in my opinion, I think the biggest thing to security is, have you identified all of the ways that someone can remote control into your system? And I really want to highlight that because I'll tell you, we did a consultation earlier this year. There were 7 different ways that people could remotely access computers inside of this network, and that is really scary. And when we asked the IT person, we said, "Hey, why do so many ways exist for you to get in?" Their response was, "Well, I just want a backup on my, I want a backup method of getting in here." And I said, "Okay, well, are you monitoring any of these?" And he said, "What do you mean monitoring? I got the program on there. What more do I need?" I said, "Well, how do you know that somebody hasn't been team viewing into one of the computers in the network? Do you have anything that monitors that?" And he said, "No." I said, "Geez, you got 7 different ways that someone could walk in the front door and nobody's watching the door. And that's really dangerous." I mean, that's a very simplified way of looking at this. But that's really that the monitoring part and the identifying part are so critical. So determine if managed access control points are identified and implemented. So this is another thing is, have you implemented a specific way that you want people to be able to get in remotely? And have you shut everything else down? Is kind of that's not part of this assessment point, but it's very important. So a sample answer might be something like managed access control points are identified as VPN, access control implemented via Active Directory and MFA. Yeah. So again, provided that you've got a VPN and the VPN's got, credential tie-ins to Active Directory, pretty common. And of course, multi-factor authentication, protecting that. That's a really solid way of implementing a managed access control point. You can't remote in with TeamViewer, that's locked down. You can't remote in with, XYZ Splash Top, Screen Connect, whatever it may be. It's only through VPN. And then I don't know, maybe they could use RDP or whatever it is, but the actual remote access is all going through that VPN and it's forced that way. Second control point is determine if remote access is routed through managed network access control points. So do we know that whatever it is, they are forced to go through VPN before they can do anything else on the network? So we say no, remote access is so in this particular sample answer, we'll say no remote access is possible without being routed through the organization's VPN access. And in other words, we're going to lock down this network so that there's nothing that's allowed through ports unless it's allowed, right? Permit only. And then we're going to say, once you're connected to the VPN, hey, you know what? You can do whatever you want. And that's the control point. That's the managed network access control point. So again, that's the whole point of this is that you really want one method of in-out and you want to lock down everything else. And that is by far and away the safest way to do it, because if they can't get into the VPN, well, then they shouldn't be running any one of the 7 remote access applications. And all of those should be going through a secure encrypted tunnel. That's the way to be secure.
100%. And this one, some of these, because it's about access, seem pretty straightforward, but if there are any difficulties in enacting this one, or if you have any other story, you've already told one, but if you have any other stories about, difficulties you ran into when making sure companies enacted this one, what would those difficulties look like?
Yeah, great question. I think the biggest thing is, people will install a firewall and they will just say to themselves, all right, I got a firewall in here, I'm good to go. See, a lot of IT guys, what they do is they get firewalls in and they unbox them, they look at them, they're nice and shiny. They get a username and password set up, they put it in place and they go, job done, right? Like firewall's in place, I'm good to go. This thing just runs itself, right? And the answer is no. A lot of times what happens is the firewall is left in a default configuration. A lot of times that's a very, very open configuration and will allow for way more ports to be open and way more leniency than needs to be in order to run a network. So one, I think the firewall is one place where you can really get yourself into trouble. If you haven't audited your firewall, if you haven't brought in a professional firewall architect to look at your firewall, I don't care how big or small you are, you can find them all over the place. Call us, we'll do it. Really, really recommend that. I think it's a necessity. Second thing is, I really feel like, in this day and age, there are enough tools out there where you can dynamically shut down or watch the ports on individual machines. So for instance, we're huge fans of ThreatLocker. They actually make it so that the ports are closed all the time on a workstation unless a particular program is open and unless that port is in use by that program during the sort of approved learning time. And anything that would want to run outside of those parameters that were considered normal for a couple of weeks has to be allowed by an administrator is an incredible way to essentially run your network by whitelisting. I had a great misinterpretation about how that tool works for many years. And now that we have a better understanding of how it works, we've mandated it for all of our clients. It is just absolutely tremendous. So, look, to be compliant, do you need a dynamic firewall? No. But you certainly need to lock your firewall down. That for sure is required. But I really advocate these days for a dynamic, only when it needs to be used, firewall. And again, there's lots of solutions out there that'll do that. Our big our favorite is Threat Locker. And again, that just locks it down so that you can really route remote access through only the firewall, only VPN, only when it's allowed. And it's just a huge plus. So yeah, lots and lots of places you can go wrong on this one. It's so easy to just let users install what they want. You give a user long enough, and I guarantee you there will be some kind of remote access software so they can work from home, sitting on that machine in no time. If they can work from home, there's no MFA. That also means that it can be brute force attacked very quickly. So yeah, those are just a couple of examples.
Absolutely, and for our listeners and viewers, Mike mentioned Threat Locker, and we can't stress the importance of a program like Threat Locker enough. At the time of this recording, we've here at On Call have put out a lot of media and content about the importance of Threat Locker, and by the time you hear this, it'll be probably a couple weeks out, but this is the last week of February. We put out a lot of content in relation to Threat Locker and the importance of locking everything down. So if you need help with that, or you think you can improve it with Threat Locker, give us a call. We'll be glad to help you out here at On Call. That's what we're here to do. But Mike, looks like this is going to be a pretty short one for us. For our listeners, they can go on to more important things with their lives. But before we get out of here, as usual, we want to hit up our favorite part, our silly question. And it is this. Whenever someone mentions remote access or remote work, I personally can't help but think about one of my favorite gadgets in the world, the television remote. So with no firewalls or VPNs in place, could a hacker or an outside person take control of my remote control?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. I think the answer is under the right circumstances, yes. So I think when you have a layered security approach, like what we do here at On Call, leveraging NIST SP 800-171, it's gonna be pretty tough to do that. But I will tell you that there's always a way. And a great example of that is one of my favorite little gadgets is called a Flipper Zero. And a Flipper Zero is exactly that. It's a really neat device. In fact, I think I have one right here. Let's see how handy my Flipper Zero is, right? Let's see here. Yep, it looks like this. Let's see if I can get it on camera here with the green screen. So it looks like this. And this is a really neat device because the Flipper Zero can actually, from across a room, see IR, and it can also see and hear all your typical radio frequencies. It can do really cool stuff. You'll see videos on YouTube about people taking their Flipper Zero and changing gas station prices and opening up hotel room doors. And all it takes is the ability to intercept or see a remote control signal. So, Roman, hey, listen, we're in the security business. We know how to get it done ourselves. If you ask, I'll have to tell you the truth. And there's not a whole lot that can't be hacked. Interestingly, I was watching a news article that was talking about the idea of video eavesdropping on webcams and microphones and things like that. And a lot of people don't know how this stuff works. So the way that video and audio work is they're essentially frequencies that go along copper wire. Okay, so your webcam is vibrating a wire between the camera end and the computer end, and it's vibrating that wire at a certain frequency. That frequency can be listened to from several feet away. I think they said something like 16 feet away can be detected. And you typically would use encryption to protect the video signal if it was over the internet. But what they don't really think about is, 16 feet's a pretty long distance. If you're in a hotel room and you got a webcam going on, there's potential for someone to be able to actually physically listen to those frequencies through this device. I can't remember what the name of it was, but it's a pretty wild world we live in, and the reality is, most computer accessories do not use shielded wire. I'm sure if you have ever done anything with Cat5 wiring, you've heard of shielded untwisted pair or shielded twisted pair. The shielding is what will block those frequencies from interfering with the environment around them. And it's indicative of the idea that all of this stuff are miniature pulses of electricity going back and forth along the wire. So, hey, look, super extreme, probably unlikely, but then again, I tell you what, when you're talking about the world we live in, which is a realistic world where one, goofy stuff happens to our clients. I'll tell you that, in the defense sector, it's really weird. People disappeared, people do weird things, they turn out to be spies. There was a very interesting incident where I showed people how backup cameras for cars were facing this window that was looking into a quality assurance department, and there was like a guy that peeled out of the parking lot, when we started like walking out to investigate why he was sitting in his car. It's very, very interesting. As a matter of fact, I think we did a YouTube short on that. But yeah, it's look, you can definitely intercept a remote control. I can tell you exactly what device to do it on. It's called a Flipper Zero. I think it's like $300. It's probably not even that expensive, and you can literally go to YouTube and do incredible, amazing things with it in about 10 minutes, like a kid's toy. And then, yeah, I mean, what you can intercept in this world is really scary, which is why security is so, so important. It's why we work so hard to help our clients be secure and help them avoid stuff like that. So, yeah, great question. Always happy to give you a silly response.
For those of you who were listening and not watching on YouTube, that Flipper Zero, I saw it in a box. That looked kind of like what, like just a smaller remote control kind of looking thing. What was that? What was that?
Oh yeah, it's sorry, I tossed it back in this drawer that is somehow
Just for those who are listening and not watching when you
yeah.
held it up, how would you
Gosh,
describe
if
it?
you're listening and watching, I'll try to break this thing out. Hang on. It looks like let me get this thing on video here. It's so cool. I love playing with this thing. So I'll hold up the camera. I don't know.
Okay.
It's got like a little mini LCD screen. It's got like a little dial pad and then another button on it. But if you look at this end, that's like what you would see on your remote control for your TV right there.
Right. So it's
And
about the size of those things. If you ever took like a quiz on the overhead in college where you had to like input your answer in a little remote thing, it kind of looks like that for
yeah,
those
and
that
it's
know what I'm talking about.
yeah, and it's got like an SD card reader here, a little mini USB-C here. Video's not picking
You
up
know,
so
you
good.
know what it actually kind of looks like? You remember those like flip video cameras?
Yeah,
Yeah, it
to-
kind of looks like that.
totally. But yeah, man, look, at on call, there's a reason why we're good at security, and we like to play with this stuff too. And at the end of the day, it's if you want to beat the bad guys, sometimes you got to really understand how they work. And that's one thing that we have a lot of fun doing around here, and playing jokes on people and all kinds of really interesting stuff around the office. So
Absolutely.
yeah, we like to have fun, that's for sure.
And that wraps up another great episode of Mission Compliance. We hope our discussion today has provided you with valuable insights, practical strategies, and inspiration to navigate the ever-evolving world of defense. We'd like to thank Mike for joining us once again and sharing his valuable expertise on Control 3.1.14. Thanks, Mike.
Oh, it's always a pleasure. And I'll tell you, just one more note. Sorry to interrupt our regularly scheduled outro, but boy, if you're thinking to yourself, this stuff can never happen to you, all right? And you're like, man, this is crazy. You're thinking this is never going to happen to me. Just think about the fact that, like, look, I just pulled out a Flipper Zero out of nowhere, right? 42 podcasts, and all of a sudden now you're finding out I've got a hacking tool sitting like 3 feet from me, and you just don't know you just don't know how close you are to being attacked. You don't ever know that. And I think that's a really great example is, uh, look, it's just you have to be prepared. You've got to be prepared. The great thing about, DFARS and NIST SP 10171 and all this, CMMC stuff is it will get you prepared. It'll get you to a better place. So appreciate all you guys listening along with us and going for the ride.
I mean, maybe you shouldn't have told people that people use Flipper Zeros to change gas prices, because I'm sure that would be the number one thing that some people listening to this might try to do. Uh, I
It's
have
a good
this.
it's a good YouTube video watch.
I have this memory when I was in grade school. My brother picked me up from school. We're driving home and we drive past, I think it was a racetrack or something, and it had the big sign with the gas prices on it. And this is not even electronic. This is when you had to put the big numbers on the sign. And they had the numbers missing except for the 5 in the last cent place. He's like, "Oh boy, gas is 5 cents. Woo!" You know. But I'm sure with the Flipper Zero, you just told a bunch of people how they could how they could change gas to 5 cents.
That's right. Gas will never be too expensive again.
Don't do that, everybody. Let's not hack gas and gas
That's
prices.
right.
Thanks.
We're not advocating for
No. Uh, but the views of Mike Frater do not reflect the views of the Mission Compliance Podcast.
that. We go again. Get me in trouble.
But the conversation doesn't end here. We encourage you to continue exploring these topics and connect with us on our social media channels. Share your thoughts, ask questions, and engage with fellow listeners by using the hashtag Mission Compliance Podcast. If you haven't already, don't forget to hit that subscribe button on your favorite podcast platform to be the first to know when new episodes like this one are released. And we truly appreciate it if you could take a minute to rate and review the show. Your feedback helps us to continue to bring you thought-provoking episodes and high-quality content. Join us again on the next episode of Mission Compliance as we delve further into the dynamic world of defense, security, and industry innovation. Until then, take care, stay informed, and make compliance your mission. See you next time.
Thanks, everybody.